Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of OneMicNite Artist Studio. My name is Marcos Luis. This is the podcast where we're taking you inside the studio of artists in their environment, and you can see the work process while we talk to them. Thank you all for joining me. If you haven't already, make sure you slide on down, click the follow sign, follow me on all the social media. We're at OneMicNite. OneMicNite is spelled OneMicNite. We're on Instagram, Facebook. We are on Tumblr. And make sure you follow the audio podcast, which is on every platform available. You can find us on iHeartRadio, Google Play, Spotify, Apple Music, you name it. Just do it. Thank you guys for all joining me. Today, I'm excited. My guest is a singer. He's a songwriter. He's a musician. He is phenomenal. Please welcome Christopher Hackett to OneMicNite Artist Session. How you doing, Christopher?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Thank you for joining me. So first of all, do you prefer Chris or Christopher? Which one is better for you?
Generally Christopher these days, but I'm totally okay.
Okay. Well, listen, I have questions.
Okay. Go right in.
All right. The first question is, who is Christopher Hackett? Who's Christopher Hackett?
Ooh, that's a big question. You starting out of the gate.
Yeah.
I'm a 55-year-old musician. I live in Monterey, California. But if you can tell from the way I say that, you can tell I am from New York, where I'm born and raised. I'm a Queens boy. And I grew up in Flushing, Queens. I was born in Flushing Hospital. And then raised a family in Westchester. I actually started playing music back in Queens, carried it into Westchester into the 90s, doing the alternative kind of scene, and rocking out during that time. And there was a great local scene happening in this town called Portchester, New York in the 90s, had the beat. It was this great club there, and Nirvana played there, Smashing Pumpkins.
Wow.
Oh man, so like in this little teeny club, like with no stage, Nirvana was like right there, like at the beginning of their tour. So
one of my all-time favorite bands. Yeah.
Just mind-blowing. Like they were just there, and it was one of those moments in life, you know, where something's happening. Everyone knows it. It could be really small, and it can be anywhere, like East Village, Portchester, Williamsburg. There's just a moment like where it like gets captured, and that was cool to kind of be a part of that. Raised my family, did lots of things along the way. You know, fun stuff, you know, that takes you on your journey, like working at Tower Records back when record stores were the thing, up till midnight, closing the store, and people buying incense and albums.
Tower Records, wow, take me back.
Yeah, it was super fun, right?
Yep.
And like, so I lived that life, like doing that, you know, as many musicians do, having multiple lives that we inhabit, right? Doing earning, trying to do music, playing live shows, trying to stick in tours and do those kind of things. Well, I fast forward, I decide, you know, all those things have happened in my life, and in a moment I want to come out west, something I always wanted to do. And
so hang on, before you even talk about that, I want to backtrack too. How did you get started in music? Where did the music come from, or where did being an artist come from? Because I'm going to assume, and I may be wrong in the assumption, but you're more than just a musician. So I feel like your art manifests in a lot of different ways. So how did you, where did all the artistry come from?
Well, I was kind of born an artist. I think everyone's an artist, really. I do. I think it's whether it has been nurtured. And my mother is an artist. She has a master's degree in art. She's an art therapist. And in my baby book, which I recently found, I'm 2 years old, and there's a picture of her, Christmas 1968, and I have an easel, and I'm painting, you know, and I had my robe on, and it's Christmas morning, you know, in the 60s, and there I am. And I think she nurtured that spirit in me. And, you know, life wasn't that easy when I was young, and I really struggled trying. I felt very different from everybody else. I wasn't sports oriented. And I didn't, I didn't feel academically great or anything like that, but art was something that differentiated me in a very suburban area of Queens, where everyone just seemed to, I fit in. I had a different spirit. And in junior high school, I was like, I need to get out. I need to get out of Queens.
Yeah.
I think many people know what that feeling's like.
A lot of us go through it in junior high. Wherever you are, but yeah, I get it.
Sometimes you want to get out of your family.
Right. Yeah.
You also
Something.
Get out of everything. Right?
It's just that point in life. I think when you reach that age, you're starting to figure some things out or question some things or whatever the situation is, but you got to get out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
we all go through it.
And so art and design, which is a school in Manhattan, had a test, and I took it in 8th grade, and I had pretty rudimentary skills, and I drew some cartoons and things like that, and I made it. And it was the first thing I ever achieved in my life. Like, really, I felt like I achieved on my own merit. No one owned it. It wasn't attached to anything. No one had ever done it. My brother didn't do it, who was a doctor and had always been this like perfect student.
Right.
And I'm this younger brother, like, how do you beat that?
Was that a problem for you? Did you always feel a comparison to the brother?
So much.
Yeah.
From everyone, from myself, from myself, definitely. And yeah, it's really hard to keep up with someone who's 3 years older and so smart and seems to know what they want to do. And you're this free spirit, kind of always was,
Yeah.
And I made this test, and suddenly I found myself taking a bus down to Main Street, Flushing, and hopping on the 7 train, and then taking 7 train to a store and hopping on what was then the double R in my portfolio, getting off at 59th Street, walking down 3 blocks.
Wow. In junior high?
High school now.
High school.
4
Okay,
years.
high school.
4 years. So yeah, I made it in 8th grade. So I went early, 9th grade. So 9, 10, 11, 12. And that was a long trip. When I think about it, I wonder how I did it. I was young. I had lots of energy.
That is. Going into the big city, for those of the people who are listening now, going from the borough, from Queens or Brooklyn or someplace else to go into Manhattan, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Yeah.
And what was really cool, and I think art and design, interestingly, my music flourished at that point, started to grow, because I think that to answer your first question, and I had started in the visual arts, but when I got there, it was not a but. And when I got there, the artistry was incredible. There were people that were so elevated, and I felt like I just squeaked in,
Right.
By sheer will. There were people that had really developed their talent, that had put in time that I just clearly hadn't. And at that time, I could start playing guitar, and I got some chords, and I'm like, I'm pissed. And
were you taking private lessons then, or were you, teaching yourself?
Interestingly, I guess this is, you mentioned my brother, or you asked about my brother. He had started on guitar, and I started on piano. And I picked up his acoustic guitar at this nylon string in the living room, and I started to get better. And he gave it up. It's interesting you said that.
Wow, that's
See,
funny.
maybe the only thing I ever took from him was the guitar. And then he just lost interest. And I didn't want to get stuck with the big piano there. And I got into the Rolling Stones and into blues. They turned me into Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf. And I'm like 15, 16, searching out. Back then, Manhattan was filled with all these old record shops, which are really hard to find these days. But you could find old blues records before you could stream anything you wanted.
Right.
You had to find it.
You had to find it. Did you spend a lot of time in the record shops?
Oh yeah. I mean, going to art school was like a door opening. So when you get there, from this kid from Queens, and I'm in if you have a New York layout, I'm in a 1 fare zone. So I had to take, 1 fare to get to there. Actually 2 fare zone. I have to go 1 to get to the train, and then the train somewhere else, which makes it extra difficult. So you get to Manhattan, and there's this worldly group of people. Andy Warhol once walked by the school. We're all like, we're all artists, and there's all these interesting people around. And everyone from this school, unlike local school, came from boroughs. So there were kids from Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan, Queens. We all took the subway into school. We all thought we were super cool.
Right.
We're 15 or 16.
And you were. That's the thing.
We still think we were.
Right. And you were, because that's what everybody dreams about. You know what I mean? Every artist dreams about being in New York City at that time. So you actually were. Yeah.
It was so good. It was the early 80s. It was fantastic. We've all kind of reconnected, on social media these days. And there was something really special about that time for all of us, no matter what we did. I know, people have become tattoo artists and fine artists, commercial artists, cartoonists, but there's an attachment that brought us all together, and it really taught me so much about diversity, backgrounds, socioeconomics, because we suddenly weren't in a neighborhood anymore.
Absolutely.
We were this hub.
Right.
And we all came from these different places. And, a key to remember is a lot of that information was very limited back then for the kids who are off.
Absolutely.
No internet, no smartphones.
Right.
What I learned about Manhattan, I learned in the Village Voice. That was it.
Right. Yeah.
That's how you knew what was happening. New Yorker magazine.
Yeah.
Village Voice. You knew what gigs were playing, who was coming to town. You kind of learned about everything good, bad, dirty, clean happened in the Village Voice. And so for the art school kids, we got really turned on to that. And that was what led me into punk rock and doing that whole thing.
I love that because, like we just said, that was a special time. That's where, all these people in music history that we hold, high, that's where they all started. You're talking about the clubs and the schooling that people had in New York City, bringing all these cultures together, which created a bang in music and arts. Everyone wanted to be here. Everyone wanted to be here. I myself wanted to be here. That was even before I was an artist, because I grew up thinking I was going to be a doctor. Oh, you always dream about, going to New York City. I was in Pennsylvania at the time, but you always dream about going to New York City and, what it's like the arts and the music and the shows and the this and the that. So that's beautiful.
And there's still so much excitement there. And I just had a bunch of friends from out here in California who went all together, and they were like, oh, did the whole New York experience, sending me pictures. I'm like, I know exactly where you are, but did you get a bagel? Let's get real. And where was the best one? So, but at that time, it was also a really different city, much more raw.
Mm-hmm. How so?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
It was nearly as gentrified. It was there were a lot of areas that were a lot more dangerous. Like, when you went to Alphabet City was tough. Where we played gigs in CBGBs, there was a methadone clinic upstairs, and, you had to watch you'd come out with our equipment, all these kids, and they were all cool with us, but there'd all be these kids coming in from Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey to play gigs, punk rock gigs, play whatever gigs were happening at CBGBs. And there's this whole thing happening on the streets, and you watch your stuff and people come up and like, hey, love your music, people start rapping with you. Classic New York kind of stuff, like Scorsese, happening in the streets. Now that's a John Varvatos store, and there's a Whole Foods. It's a
completely different,
a whole different thing. It says Joey Ramone, and it's not the same.
Right.
And that's not, a judgment on it. It's just different.
Right.
But I think working in those conditions is really rich soil for arts.
Right. Absolutely.
You need a little of everything.
You do.
In that, all that nutrients to go. And that's where you said these little segments grow, like what was the Lower East Side. If you think of what came out of there from the late 60s on, from Lou Reed to Patti Smith to Blondie, Talking Heads, and then everybody came.
Everybody came.
Even the Police, the Pretenders,
the music scene, the poetry scene. You know what I mean? Like all that stuff in there, and the Village. Both. Yeah,
and that attracted, because that new arts were coming up, and then young people at that time, like Bruce Springsteen, like just young, coming out, poets bringing all that. Then you had the really happening fashionable bringing it, Studio 54 is happening, Diana Ross is coming, Mick Jagger's coming, Grace Jones is coming, David Bowie's coming, Iman's coming. And now this whole thing happened, it's a little different now. Well, very different in New York now, because a lot of the artists have been kind of pushed into other areas of New York, not necessarily out of New York, but not in that particular
location. Right. Yeah. I'm going to backtrack just a minute, because you mentioned CBGBs. Let's talk about CBGBs for a minute. That was the birthplace of punk rock, what else? You know, it was like the center, which was everything, right? So this place was back, I guess it was founded back in about 1973. And a sad day when it closed back in 2006.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, really sad. I played one of our last shows during those like final shows there, because we were kind of a, you know, kind of one of the pivotal bands there that started playing there, the band that I came from. And yeah, I mean, it started out as like, you know, country bluegrass and blues, right? That's what it was supposed to be. And it morphed into, as the punk rockers found it, you know, I believe probably through television, and the Ramones, as history tells that story, kind of opened the door for the punk rock crowd to say, God, you know, back then, just to find a place that would let you play.
Right. Yeah.
If you were the Ramones or the New York Dolls or someone doing something. Or all right. So, you know, back then it was a really different area. The Lower East Side, Alphabet City, that whole area. And you know, it's become much more gentrified now. And where CBGBs was at that time is, you know, now John Varvatos. It's a much cleaner, safer neighborhood. You know, that was the Bowery, and the Bowery, you know, was famous for being, you know, just a very different place than it is today. And that was, again, it was an introduction to bands and music and lifestyles and perspectives that it opened a world. Again, Manhattan just kept unfolding for this young kid, right? First the artist, and I met my first punk rockers in, you know, art and design, where I went to school. And that, you know, back then, you know, safety pins and army jackets and all these thrift shops that kind of existed in Manhattan.
Yeah, what was the punk rock scene like? Because a lot of people, you know, it's kind of a quiet, you know, a special niche right now. Not many people know about the punk rock scene from back then. What was that like for you? What exactly was it?
Well, you know, for me,
what is it, I should say?
Yeah, you know, it's a lot of things.
Yeah,
it's a lot of things, and there's much more versed people on it than myself, you know. And I think of people like John Joseph of the Cro-Max, who's just like really knows New York City, right? Really grew up in the scene. He's a city kid, but you know, there's like classic punk, you know, that people think about, like British punk. And there's kind of like, you know, punk rock of like Ramones era punk. And we're a little bit post that, like a subgenre, what I call hardcore punk. And we were like the Ramones sped up, faster. Really, our biggest influence was the Bad Brains. From Washington, D.C. And the Mob, the genesis of the Mob was seeing them on an early show at CBGBs when they went to see, who was it? They went to see one of the Richard Lloyd. Oh gosh, it's escaping me right now. Anyway, they went to see a guitarist. And they ended up seeing the wrong guitar player, but the Bad Brains were opening. They had just come up. It was pre-dreadlocks. They were still kind of doing a Sex Pistols-y kind of thing with HR, with the sport jacket. And they just blew what would be the Mob away. You know, the guys that saw were like, oh my God, we're forming a band, which is the classic genesis of every band, right? Oh my God, we're forming a band.
Yeah, just get together.
That's the way it was, and it is even to this day, even though maybe garage rock is different now. Just artists coming together in their bedrooms, writing beats, doing what they're doing. It's the same thing. Oh my gosh, I can do that.
Yeah,
and
I can do that. You play drums, you play this, you play that. Let's get together.
I can do it. Yeah. And the Mob was formed in kind of the wake of the Bad Brains, like proteges of the Bad Brains for a really long time. And Jack patterned his guitar style after Dr. No. We did everything Bad Brains. And that also was an introduction to dub and reggae, Rastafari, all these things that were like, again, unfolding, right, for me. And so the Mob, just like the Bad Brains, would play these searingly fast as we could play sets, and then like fall into like a dub set. And just everyone would kind of recuperate from all the craziness of what was happening. And then,
because that's high energy, that's a lot of energy happening.
Oh my gosh, it was a blast, watching it, and it's funny because playing the music, I have a lot of interest in music, reggae and soul music and
Yeah, I was going to say, where did your inspiration come from? Because it sounds like you take it from a lot of different genres of music.
Yeah. Actually, my earliest influences are soul music, R&B music. And the reason is I had a really cool uncle. I still do, Uncle Lewis. And Uncle Lewis was married to a Black woman in 1971, and like really Afrocentric life, very different than most kids' upbringing in Queens, growing up in a really Irish Catholic white neighborhood. Here comes my uncle, right? Married to a really beautiful young Black woman, having an interracial mixed family, and blasting WBLS and hustling records downtown. He knew a lot of record company execs. He sang in doo-wop groups in the 50s and knew a lot of people. So he'd hook up with all these records and we'd go trade them. And he'd like trade maybe 50 records at these record shops to get like 5 cool records. And, Earth, Wind and Fire and the Commodores and Funkadelic and Parliament, Al Green,
right.
All that stuff was stuff I was listening to growing up, as well as the stuff that was on the radio, like AM radio, which was kind of a mix of just all kinds of stuff. And I just have this really strong foundation in that. And he turned me on to rock and roll, through, at that time, for me, the late 60s, early 60s, 70s, like the blend of R&B and rock and roll is really tight. Like it's so close. People recording each other's songs, Creedence Clearwater's recording a song, Tina Turner and Ika covering it, like right away. Beatles record Hey Jude, it's still in the charts. Wilson Pickett records it with Duane Allman, and it's beautiful. Like, I don't know if that exists anymore, but
you get every now and then, you do get one or two, but yeah, you're right.
You get this where they were really tight, and that turned me on to things like the Rolling Stones, who turned me on to blues and all these kind of things. That's my roots. That's my heart. But my entryway was hardcore punk through the Mob, because they were playing live shows and they were 3 years older than me. And I was the youngest guy in the group. Once upon a time, I was the youngest guy.
That's funny. So tell us about your group. Tell us about the Mob.
So the Mob is a group formed in Queens, in Jackson Heights. And it's basically Jack, Ralph, and Jose, really, and Jamie came along. The drummer, were the genesis of the Mob. And they literally met in high school, childhood friends, started playing in a garage, and formed the Mob after seeing the Bad Brains, right? It's a really simple story. They were like, we're going to do it, except you took 4 Black dudes from DC playing high-speed stuff handed down to these 4 white kids in Queens, trying to take it and do it back again,
That's
and
funny.
It's just funny how music works, right?
Yeah.
Like how any culture works and how the arts work.
Right. Which goes back to what we just talked about. You play the drums, you can play the guitar. Let's get a band. We can do this.
We could do it.
Yeah.
And I think for so many people, it's that inspiration. And so those guys started out, and Jack, who passed away 2 years ago, was just this incredible force. This redheaded big guy. He played wicked guitar. He was so good. And he went to NYU. He was smart as a whip. And he ended up continuing his career. He toured with the Beastie Boys and Murphy's Law, and got in, and then ended up being the manager of Clutch and Gwar and a bunch of bands all the way till his passing. But at that point, he was emerging as that, right? And he got all in on the DIY kind of stuff. And he was doing mailing lists, and they created a single and then another single. And it's rumored that the Mob actually recorded the first hardcore punk single ever from New York, right? Like 1980, the first. Wow. And if you go to Niagara Club, where it used to be A7, was a scene club on the corner of Avenue A and 7, there's a plaque, and the Mob is on it as one of the originators of punk rock. But little Chris wasn't in the band yet, because I'm younger than them. And so I'm like, they're doing this, and they're like 17, and I'm like 14, playing in my room to Rolling Stone records, imagining I'm Keith Richards. That's like where I'm at. And I meet Jack at a restaurant we worked at, and he was a bartender and kind of a wild guy, but he buttoned it up, and I was playing him some songs. We were talking about it, and he, I'm hanging out, smoking, and kind of doing that kind of stuff. And he's like, "Oh, I gotta play you something hard," And he plays it at Vambrace. I'm like, "What the hell is this? I've never heard anything like this." And he's like, "I've got a record." I'm like, "You got a record out?" "I've got a cassette I recorded in my bedroom," And they were like stars to me,
Right. Yeah.
And I started hanging out with them. Partying, hanging out. I started roadieing for Jack. I kind of became his protege. Jose's playing bass, and they're opening for the Ramones now. And so at that time, punk rock is not a very lucrative business. No one made any money. This is way before anyone made money. We did everything ourselves. There were no record companies involved. If you were the Ramones, they were like a rarity, like you were a really big group.
Right. Like a true independent artist.
Right. We were like nothing. We were trying to scramble for gigs at like L'Amour's and Greensleeves and all these local clubs, Max's Kansas City, CBGB, like you're trying to get into anything you could get in. And I do my first like little East Coast tour with the Mob. I've just graduated high school. So it's right around that time I joined the Mob, and that's where I kind of dovetail into really being a musician, and getting my intro to them. And what a group, we were on again and off again for over 30 years. We're totally brothers. We're all original members. And Jose, the bass player, we were actually brothers-in-law for like 30 years. And so he played bass, and then I replaced him, and I played bass. Then he came back and played bass, and I played guitar. And we're so tight. We're tight to this day. I play him all my music. Anything I write, I send to Jose. We talk about it. If he doesn't like it, I don't play it. So like we really are brothers,
Right. I love this. I love this story. First of all, let's, being one of the first, pioneers of punk music, that's huge. And then for you to join, this, maybe not at the time, but, group that was doing something that's historical now. Like, how is that? How do you feel about that now?
It's
incredible.
It's humbling, because when you're doing these things, you have no idea. You're just doing it because you feel like it's good.
Right.
It's the thing to do. You feel proud of it. We loved our speed. We loved what we did. We loved our message, which was always, rock against racism. And we were always, it was a very positive movement, PMA, right? That was
right.
The Bad Brains thing, positive mental attitude, acceptance, right? And, and that's what the scene represented. You could show up at that scene. It looks so scary. It looks so rough from the outside. It looks
right.
But inside was this beauty. And now, you're kind of an adult, or I've grown up. That was 35 years ago. And the Mob is kind of this legendary band, right? Very unsung, and not promoted as much as a lot of contemporaries like the Cro-Mags and, so many bands of that era. And it, I think it almost speaks to the punk ethos more, that the Mob existed in what the Mob was. Do it yourself, never made it big, just stayed what it was. We did 2 singles and a 12-inch. And we stopped right there. Then we played shows, and we had fun, and we wrote some songs. We actually recorded a song in like 2015 or something. But we really existed as the real entity. We never tried to be fake. We just tried to show up and play hardcore punk the way we felt it, the way our roots were always the same. And Jack was a real steward of that, like keeping that, like he didn't want to evolve it. It was like, this is what we do. We show up, we play 1.5-minute songs. We play as fast as we can. We do it when we're 20, we do it when we're 30, when we're 40.
I love it.
We still do it,
And I love that. I love that because there's, that's the beauty in it, is the authenticity of being an artist and being true to what you want to do. I love that.
It was just a real thing.
Yeah, the real thing.
And I played my last show with the Mob exactly a week before I moved to California and I was born and raised in New York and never left, lived all over New York. So I'm moving to California, I'm changing my life. And it's whatever, we'll play shows. I didn't know that would be my last show with the Mob. I didn't know that Jack would pass away 2 years later. But we play this show at Generation Records down in the Village in the basement, surrounded by record bins. And all these cool people show up, all old friends and guys from the scene and girls from the scene. And we're playing in this record shop, doing this promotion of this book for hardcore. And it was such a moment. I felt like we were back home. We were literally 5-6 blocks from where we started at this record shop, just playing low budget. As a matter of fact, the
like a full circle moment.
Full circle moment.
Yeah.
And in a classic Spinal Tap moment that every band experiences, we set up the gear, and the guy said there would be a backstage lineup. That means the gear is there. And I show up and I bring my guitar head, and they have some cabinet from, I don't know, it was like Grand Funk Railroad, like 1971. It had like a plug I've never seen. I've been playing my music my whole life. I'm like, what kind of input plug is this? Who has this cable? Like, it literally came from, I don't know, the Moby Grape, some crazy tour. Wow. Like, they don't make this anymore. So the stage, engineer is like, oh shit, like we have to get a cabinet, makes these calls, classic New York moment. I'm running to Brooklyn to get a cabinet. I'm like, you're running to Brooklyn? What? How are you getting to Brooklyn? He's like, I'm taking the train. I'm like, wait.
Taking the train?
Am I playing tonight? Like, I told Jose, I'm like, I don't think I'm playing the show. I think you guys are going to have to play as a 4-piece, because they're a 5-piece. I'm playing rhythm guitar. I'm like, because he's going to Brooklyn to find a cabinet. I'm moving, but everything's in storage. All my guitars, I pull this guitar and this head out of storage. I'm a mess, like emotionally, because I'm moving and my whole life's up. And he's going to get a cabinet in Brooklyn. I'm like, this is never going to happen. 5 minutes before we go on, he shows up with the right cabinet.
I love it.
And we go.
Love that.
And here we are, 50 years old, living the same kind of crazy, precarious moment that we did 35 years ago. It was kind of fun.
That's fun.
Just a classic nutty mob moment. We were like, I exist for this stuff. This is what we do. This is it. Art is not about. I do. I miss the live shows, and the pandemic changed all that. Like, I was talking to Jose and Ralph about coming back. We're going to do a tribute show for Jack. And that's still maybe in the works, me going back to New York and playing. But in the meantime, I started this. We were in seclusion. We were all shut down in 2020. And that's what really launched me doing Monk in the 66, because I didn't have access to the band. I was bandless for the first time since I'm a kid. And that was a vehicle for me. They were my brothers, they're my friends. And they also represented parts of me that I realized that maybe I didn't want to explore at that time as an artist. For whatever reason, I was blocked. And as 2020 closed down on all of us, and we're all inside working in my studio, I had to start exploring things like vocals, lyrics, other guitar duties, things that I could share out before, which are now owned by me. And what do I want to do with that?
Right.
And it really challenges your artistry.
It makes you step up. It makes you do a lot of things. I mean, you have to find the confidence. You have to find, the trust. You have to find your voice.
Yeah.
In general.
And it's a lot. And you have to wear a lot of hats.
Right.
And, I think many artists, I think all artists suffer from self-judgment, really harsh, critical judgment of their own work. Mm-hmm. It's part of our process. But I think we also have to learn to not let that torpedo us and our work, because we can also do that really easily, because no one's a harsher judge than you are on yourself.
Right.
So, when I record music, and then there's the creative process. You write, you start recording. It gets a little more technical, and you're laying down these tracks. At a certain point, you have to move to I'm going to mix this. I'm going to produce this. I have to be self-critical. I have to start eliminating things. Every note I play isn't perfect. Every solo isn't great. My composition could be tweaked, and you have to put on a different hat.
Right.
And if that hat is not self-critical, but it is, I guess, objectively critical on the work, and says, this is what needs to be done to make this better. And
have you found yourself having a hard time doing that? Like being a producer, being the ear, the critical? Yeah.
At first, it was a complete obstacle for me. I felt like I was stuck in a creative cycle. I was creating a lot when as soon as I moved to California, I was writing demos. Monk and the 66 hadn't evolved into a project yet. But I was writing and exploring, doing things with sound bites and drum loops and samples, and really just trying to get into the music that evolved since I was a kid, you know, playing with cassettes. And, you know, I learned that wearing those, you know, different hats is essential for moving your artistry along. Because what happened was I was stuck in a cycle of creativity and I wasn't moving out of it. And then I couldn't figure out why. And I have a really wise friend, and he was a producer. He did live in Brooklyn and was producing in Brooklyn, an engineer. And he, you know, kind of drew these 3 circles. And he said, you know, there's really 3 areas. There's your creative circle. And he drew this circle. And then he drew this other one and kind of overlapped it. And he's like, this is the kind of the admin circle, the administrative circle. This is the one that needs to take control of the creative work, that needs to tighten it, format it, mix it, you know, cut the loose ends, like polish this. And then like you have that final person that's going to kind of put it out there, like do all that work and share it and get it out. And like, I struggled to get to that person that was finishing things and producing. And then I just said, okay, I've got to learn how to separate these roles, the musician role, the creative role, and say, this song is done. This project's done. I'm happy with it.
Right.
Let's move on.
Because you weren't doing that when you were part of the band. Now you're, as a solo artist, you have to wear a couple of different hats.
Yeah. And the band's a democracy. Well, whatever they say about democracy. Yeah. You know, they're a dynamic anyway. Right. And there is a protocol, and it's a shared responsibility for sure. And back when I worked in the Juice Men, which is my like 90s band, Juice Men released 2 albums, 2 EPs. They were produced by a real producer, Sean Slade. He produced a lot of things, Dinosaur Jr., Buffalo Tom. And he used to kick us out of the studio and just say, okay, go have lunch, don't come back. Like, band leave, right? Because I'm doing my work. Yeah, I'm the adult in the house, and you're a bunch of long-haired rock and rollers, right? So get out. And like, that was in Lenny Kravitz's studio in Waterfront in Hoboken at that time. So we'd go into Hoboken for a couple of hours. Sean would do the work, the grown-up work, and he was real harsh. He'd be like, "I'm cutting that guitar part." I remember we had a drummer. He showed up with like 7 cymbals. He's like, he's going to do this song. He's like, "No, X that. 2 cymbals." He's like, "But," he's like, 2 cymbals. We're not recording 7 cymbals. I'm not doing it. You know, you have an adult in the room. Right. And I think that is so important for the success of a song, whether you're what George Martin was for the Beatles, right? Smokey Robinson. When you think of these great, Phil Spector, you think of these greats, what they bring, you have to, you know, artists can do it all themselves. We can. But sometimes the greatest thing we can do is, as artists, sometimes for some of us more easy than others, is to collaborate. Absolutely. And have someone show something on you and see something that elevates. Yes. Right. And that's like, they're exactly right. Exactly right. Those are magic moments. Yeah. Like, I love those things in music, in time. I love when someone can do that. And I also like, you know, lightning in a bottle kind of things. That's what I like about punk rock. I'm more about the loose ends. Capture it, you know, like what makes like Ray Charles great is like, it's not because he spent like, I mean, he's Ray Charles, right? But not because he spent all this time to make it perfect. It's because what he just supercharged in that moment is all you needed to do. Like, just capture it. Right. And I try to think of those, and that's what I think is beautiful in the modern moment. Podcast, do it yourself in your home studios. I really work on that, though. I play my own music here and can do anything. I try to capture my parts fresh, keep it loose, keep the moment, walk away from it, come back, and then when I'm done with the creative thing, producer steps in and says, "Okay, have we decided this is the song we're going to release as a single?" Okay, young man. Right. Yeah. But go now take lunch. Right. And now you have to wear that hat. So you have to decide all those things. Do you ever take, with your solo project, do you ever take feedback? Do you listen, or is this something that you're creating now? So you're trying to find out which roads to
to go down the project?
You know, I love feedback, and I love people to share anything they like with me, particularly in this moment. I'm really about working with an authentic voice in every way for me right now. That's kind of the space I'm in, right? Authentic lyrics that are authentic to me, playing that is authentic to me, though anyone could share anything. So at that point, it's like, please, right? Like, you see me in a way that's maybe different than the way I see myself. But I have to say, Marcos, like, I write songs for me, you know, and I'm at a moment in my life, I'm not looking for things commercial. I'm looking for creative fulfillment. And they're like they can be the same. But for me, at this moment, it's like the single I just put out, Like a Man on the Moon, I put it out because it's authentic me in that moment. I'm, you know, writing, and it's just coming out, and I want to capture it and I want to share it. And I hope somebody likes it. But the more important thing is that I like it.
That you like it, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't write it with any, like, I wonder if this will make this chart, or I wonder if this could get on the Spotify playlist. It's cool if it does, but it's more cool that I wrote it and I finished it and I did it and I enjoyed the creative process. And maybe someone listening can say, oh, I like that. It makes me feel something, or it makes me think of something or manifest something in my life. That's so much more important in the end, I think, for artistry.
It is. Are you working on something right now we can take a listen to, or do you, you feel like, you feel like sharing anything?
Yeah.
Because we're inside the artist studio.
It's pretty raw. I don't know if I'm going to share the whole thing, but we were talking about producers making music. And, you know, one thing I have found in the Monk and the 66 project is a lot of times I find songs that I love. I listen to music all the time. I don't watch too much TV. I listen to music. And I stumble on songs and I just like throw them in a folder, like things that I like to cover one day because they move me. So there is a producer, writer, musician. He's passed now. His name was Johnny Bristol. He was a Motown producer. He was behind a lot of things. Most notably, like Ain't No Mountain High Enough with Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell. That's where he started. He did stuff with the Supremes, later did stuff with Boz Scaggs and a bunch of different artists. Really, really established. He had some solo hits. And so most notably, you might know his voice. And a friend of mine from art school had taught me this later in life when I reconnected with him, that on the Supremes, Someday We'll Be Together, Diana Ross is singing and there's a male singing. And he's singing like there's a voice popping in and out of that song. Really? Sing it pretty for me. That's Johnny Bristol.
That's Johnny Bristol. Wow.
Right? Because that's his song. And he wrote it back pre-Motown and brought it to Diana Ross. That was going to be a solo single. And he's on that song singing. So that's how you might know his voice. That's a
little bit of trivia for you today, too. Wow.
Yes. Okay. So that's Johnny Bristol. He's a super cool dude, wrote some great songs. So I stumble on this Boz Scaggs album, which is really good stuff. And I find this song called Pain of Love on it. And I'm in a really emotionally rough time, relationship time, and emotionally raw. And I listen to the song and I go, this song is everything I want to say. These words are almost words to me, right? Like the pain of love. And, you know, the lyrics, they just really resonated with me. And so I started fooling around with it. And I started playing these things, and it has this lush orchestration. It's not something I'm going to do or would do. It's not my style. But it's like, I wonder how I can tap into this lyric, because I felt like I wrote this song. Or the song Somewhere, Johnny, he's gone for 15 years or so, but I felt like he was like, Christopher, here's this one for you. So I've been working on this, and I'll share a little bit of it.
I would love that. Yeah.
Not completely done. I haven't, these are all kind of first take vocals, guitars and stuff, but I'm trying to get the vibe to start with. So I hope the audio comes through for you, and tell me if it doesn't. Let's see if I can do this for you. Oops. Hold your horses on that one. That's my new single. That's out.
Oh, wow.
I don't want to put that. I don't know how that got on there, but let me reboot it here. Hold on. I'm sorry about that, sir. Here we go, Pain of Love. Let's bring that up. So one of the great things about working in your own studio is you have your music on hand all the time. You don't have to book studio time, and you might not have the luxuries of soundproofing and all those kind of things, but you do have the luxury of comfort.
That's right.
Creatively comfortable.
You're doing it at your own time.
Own time, own place, pajamas, cup of coffee, and like come in and like, yeah, I feel like singing today.
This is exactly why I wanted to do this, because you're in the space, you know what I mean? And you get to, we need a glimpse inside an artist, studio to see them at work. This is exactly why I wanted to do this.
Very cool. So here we come. This one is Pain of Love, written by Johnny Bristol and Boz Scaggs, I think around 1975, my version. Hold one more time. Oh, I'm so sorry. Right. Give me one more hold. This is going to take another. There's a second version. That was my first version. Let's close that. Sorry, I realized there was two. Fun fact, this is one of the rare songs that I've actually taken 2 or 3 swipes at. I usually just do something in one take and I kind of work from there. But I wasn't tapping into the emotion the right way. And for me, so I took a few swipes at it to get the tempo right so I could sink into it a little better in my own style. And I think I landed it on this version. So I feel like I'm in the right space to like continue some overdubs and stick with this. It's kind of a fun moment in song creation where you go from, it's an idea, it's a sketch.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of playing with it. You don't really know if it's going to go anywhere. It just may be discarded. And somehow it comes alive. Does that happen for you, Marcos?
Yeah, of course.
Something
of course
you
it
do?
does. Of course
and
it
you're
does.
just like,
yep.
Whoa, it's a thing.
Absolutely does.
It's become a thing. And like you kind of get this little like love for it. You're like, oh, like I want to nurture you.
Right.
You're like this little creation.
For me as an actor, that happens.
Does it really?
Yeah. Sometimes, I go through the lines and I'm memorizing lines, and it's not till that moment when I get on stage and it's like everything just falls into place. That's when you renew your love for
like love for the character, love for the words I'm saying. You can embody them where it feels like a natural voice. And that's the way I feel in this one. So I'll play it a little bit of it for you. I think I finally got the right version. So,
first reaction.
So that's what I'm working on right now.
Love it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like that.
It's fun, it's like, it's scary to share it. Like it's really early for me. I literally just sang those parts last night. Before I went to bed, I was like, I want to capture something before I fall asleep. So they're very imperfect, but they're really like a lyric that I understand, you know?
Yeah.
Will it make you sigh? Will it make you cry? Will it make you die? Will it make you try to just say, I can do it, baby?
Right,
You know,
yeah.
like, and sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can. And, you know, it's just kind of where we are in our spirit. And sometimes songs and in your art, you can say things that you can't say in your real life.
Absolutely right.
Right? You can be a
And
character.
that's what it's there for. That's exactly what the art is there for.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
for expression.
I feel blessed to have that ability
Yeah.
to call on it sometimes when the words elude me, because they do a lot, you know, and I may be real wordy in some ways and in other ways. You
Right.
know, so
no, you're right.
I think,
It's back to what we talked about in the very beginning, you know, art therapy and art being therapy for expression, you know, expressionism and being able to express yourself in so many different ways, you know, and healing and yeah, a lot of things. A lot of
yeah,
things.
I mean, like this song, my current single, Like a Man on the Moon, you know, I've been doing a lot of like therapy on just childhood trauma, things that have really troubled me in my life, right? And caused me to, you know, to suffer from depression and symptoms of that, isolation, and, you know, like really tough things. And during like a really rough time, I was journaling, and I do try to journal because it helps you process, just like singing and acting. When those mediums are sometimes maybe even too complex for a really raw emotion, one of the best things you can do is just write it. Just journal it like a mad person. Just like, no one's going to read it, right? Just get it out. Like it really helps you. And
you feel like, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say, do you feel like that during this pandemic time, like the last 18 months, that has been, it's kind of been like a blessing and a curse. You know what I mean? Like we're all locked up, we're all, you know, isolated. But at the same time, it's also been a place where we can heal, where we can work through some issues, where we can confront some issues, where we can, you know, address some things that have been bothering us, and then find a new route to do things.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So
like literally find a voice.
Yeah, I literally found a different voice. My mob voice, my Juice Man voice, my New York voice. And then I have this new one, and I feel like it's tapping into that. I actually looked at that picture of me as that little kid with the canvas painting in 1968. And I told my mother, I texted her, and I'm like, that kid's calling me. Ooh. He wants me to do this. He's saying, use your art. Like, that's your power. Like, it will save you. It's what you have, right? Like, it was the weirdest moment.
Art will save you.
Yeah, like
art
that little
will save you. It will.
It did. Right. It did. And that little kid, me, who I had forgotten a really, really long time ago. And I looked right at him and I said, oh my gosh, that's me, the pure me, you know, 2 years old, not bothered yet, right? Not damaged, not taught, not domesticized, not like, you know, given all these rules to live by. This 2-year-old that's like painting and happy, and it's Christmas. And he's saying, don't matter what your age is. It doesn't matter who you are or what you do or what you have to do to make a living, right? You're an artist. Create something. You know, most things in the world weren't meant to last. They're meant for the moment. Right? Everything doesn't have to last forever. All our ancestors for tens of thousands of years, they haven't, I mean, we like things to create to things that last as humans, cave drawings and things like that. But ultimately, most of what we live in life is temporary, right? It's not for longevity.
Not forever, no, not at all.
Not forever. And when you get out of that thinking and just say, I'm going to create for the sake of creating. I'm going to create because that's what I'm made of. That's what we are all made of. That's what humans are. We're creation machines. We dream. That's what we do, right? We dream stuff up, and then you make it real. Some people make it more real than others, but we'll do it.
Any advice you give to people who, you know, are at this point in their life where you are, you know, like, and looking back on, like you just said, what would little Chris say to big Chris now?
He'd say, don't be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to be you. I spent many, many years worried about what people would say about me, or worried about how I would stack up, right? Whether that was my brother as a little kid, or competition at work or in bands, or how well could someone could play guitar better than me or whatever. And I realized it's all irrelevant. At the end,
Yeah.
you are a unique being. There's no Marcos Luis. There's you.
Yes. Yes.
Anyone could play a role, but only you could play it like you. And that may resonate with someone, it may not, it doesn't really matter. It's you doing you. Better guitar players than me, better singers than me, but like the song I just played you, only one person's going to listen to Johnny Bristol that way and start playing it that way, and that's
Interpret
me.
it that way. Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
And honoring that,
Right.
and saying, you know what, I'm not too old to honor it. I may be a grandfather, I may be a mom, I may be a 13-year-old, right? It doesn't matter. Honor your authentic voice. You know, try not to be afraid, because it's a scary thing to put yourself out there. It's a scary thing to talk about depression or isolation or your insecurities. And so many artists, that's what we actually are dealing with, right? Absolutely. Our insecurities. Yeah. We put it on the stage. Sometimes we hide it.
Right. We
fake it. We become somebody else so that we can say, well, this is my characters. But it's really us.
But it's us. It's us.
We're tapping in. Right. Like John Lennon said once, he writes, I write all these songs. I'm angry about all these people and I'll write all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I look back a couple of years later, I'm like, oh, it's about me. They're all about me.
So true.
How I perceive the world, how I relate to a situation. And in that moment, I may be angry at this person and I'm going to shoot venom. And then 3 years later, you look at it and you're like, why was I angry? And what was that anger about? And you're like, you know what? That song has nothing to do with that person.
Absolutely.
It's about me.
It's about
who I was in that moment. And now I can see it and go, oh, maybe not my best moment.
Right.
You know? Yeah. That's the truth, right?
And confronting those things, those, demons or whatever's going on inside of you, and breaking it down and being true to it, and allowing yourself to be expressive in that way.
Art is life.
Yeah, art is life. Yep.
Life is art. Like they go back and forth, and just learning to live in that, and express it and not be afraid. And don't let your moment in time, your age, your surroundings, your trappings, whatever they may be, make you think less of yourself as an artist. Do it. Be proud of it. Realize the next great thing you do will be the next thing you do. It will be better.
Absolutely.
Right? Just say, I love this for the moment. Ready to go. Bye-bye. Fly away. No
fear and no regrets.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that way to work. And it's taken me a really long time to find that.
And it's okay.
Yeah. It's okay. And it's okay. And I hope that maybe I encourage other people to do it at any moment in their life. Younger, older, just go for it.
And I'm sure you will.
I think
we're going to leave them on that note. Now, first of all, I want to thank you so much for your time, and thank you for taking us inside your studio, and thank you for sharing the words, the wisdom, the knowledge, the gems, and of course, the first listen to your music in the studio.
Thank you. Oh, that was the scariest moment of all.
And you confronted that fear. So
I did. I did it right here with you today. It was super fun. And I'm so honored to be here.
Thank you.
And to share and be a part of your day, which was amazing. Thank you so much.
So tell everybody how we can get in touch with you and how we can find you and follow you and get some of that music.
Probably the easiest way is just if you're on Spotify, really any streaming platform, but Spotify, Monk and the 66, or Apple Music, Monk and the 66. That's really the best. I'm also on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook, but I probably speak most directly through Spotify. It's just an easy artist platform and a fun one to work with. So I do put a lot of energy into that as an artist, just because as an indie artist, it's a pretty powerful platform.
That's right. Absolutely. Everyone, I'm going to give you his Instagram, so please make sure you follow him on there. He also has some cool videos of him on there, some pictures. Get to know Christopher Hackett. Follow him at Monk66. It's at M_O_N_K_66 on Instagram. Make sure you follow him. Check out the music on Spotify, Apple. He's a dynamic artist, dynamic person. You can follow us at OneMicNite. OneMicNite everything. OneMicNite is spelled OneMicNite. You can listen to the audio podcast at OneMicNite Podcast with Marcos Luis. And follow us on the YouTube platform to see the podcast. And also, while you're there, check out some of the old videos of OneMicNite back from 2006. We've been an indie platform for 15 years supporting independent artists. Also follow me at Marcos Luis, MarcosLuis, Marcos Luis everything. Go to the .com for both. You can find out more of what I do. And I also want to thank nyfa.org, New York City Mayor Office, and New York City Cultural Affairs for the City Corps Artist Grant to help promote these artists. So thank you guys all again. Follow us, subscribe, share, rate us. We'll see you next time.